All right, guys. I'm assuming I'm live right now. So today, I figured I'd spend some time and overclock my Ryzen 7 1700 CPU. I just got a new motherboard, and so I figured, why not? Let's go ahead and go for it. Let me just take a look at all of these different settings. No, that should be fine. And then I can. All right. So before you start overclocking, things you're gonna need: Cinebench, CPU Z, GPU Z if you're doing a GPU overclock. We're not going to be worrying about that, but that's good to have. Hardware monitor and Prime 95 to do a stress test. All right, Cinebench is going to be our initial test to see what we got going on, and the rest are to monitor all the different settings and hardware, and as well as a longer test. Okay. Wow, that frame rate is pretty bad on the stream. I'm streaming with my phone today, obviously, since I'm going to have to continue to restart my computer when we overclock. It's not really something that I can stream from my desktop. Alright, so we're going to hit the delete key. That way we can get into the BIOS. In case you've never overclocked before, you want to do it from the BIOS. That's going to be your most stable way of doing it. So hitting that delete key is going to allow us to get into there. Alright, so it should load into the BIOS, and in here we have a whole bunch of different settings. Now, in case you haven't looked in the description of this video, I'm running a 1700 with an AMD Noctua, with a Noctua NF, or, right, NFD? No, sorry, NH D15. Cooler on it, and 16 gigs of Corsair Vengeance RAM, and the motherboard is a Crosshair 6 Hero. So let's go ahead and overclock this thing. So right now we're running at, what are we running? We're running a small overclock of 3600 megahertz. If you get this motherboard, it does come with presets. So you can go over here to overclocking presets. And you can see we have, wow, that's really out of focus. There we go. We can go ahead and have a gamer's overclock, a base clock overclock, a 4 gigahertz overclock, and a 3600 DRAM overclocking profile. I'm going to leave my RAM at its rated 3000 speed. I tried this one, but it didn't seem to be quite stable when I started running games and OBS at the same time. So I don't think my CPU can hit 4 gigahertz, but we're going to try to do more of an direct overclock. So we're going to leave this alone. DOCP standard, that's just going to run the memory at its rated frequency. We're not going to mess with base clock. We're going to leave that exactly where it is. Though we're going to change the core ratio. So we're going to go ahead and let's try 4 gigahertz. So we're going to type 40, enter. All right. We're not going to have any performance bias. We can actually put that on none. I don't want that. 3000, that's normal. And let's see, SMT mode, we're going to leave that enabled. We want to have all our threads. Core performance boost, I'm not really sure what that setting does. We're going to leave that alone then. Alright, so here we're going to go ahead and put that in manual mode, and we're going to go ahead and adjust this. Right, shouldn't I be able to? Oh, sorry, override right here. Put that at 1.4. Let's go ahead and try that. 1.4 volts. Again, if you don't know, RYZEN can overclock at, I believe, up to 1.45 volts, but that's going to be like your maximum you ever want to do, and that's going to definitely degrade your CPU over time. 1.4 is how high you can go. 1.4 to 1.42 is how high you want to go without really damaging anything, but it's going to be very hot. You want to try to keep it below 1.4, I'd say, for like an everyday overclock, but you know, people can have their disagreements with that. Alright, advanced, we don't need any of that. Let's go to our fan controllers to make sure our fans are running. CPU fan is on standard, that's fine. Chassis fan, the one DC powered fan, I put that on standard, and these two seem to also be on standard. Okay, great. Again, you're going to want to have a decent CPU if you're overclocking the CPU. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and put this on Let's leave it on standard for now, actually. Let's see everything standard and just see how that works. Okay, we're gonna save changes and reset. So the first thing we're gonna do is see if it will even boot into, if it'll boot into Windows. After that, we'll run some tests like Cinebench after we open up our monitor so we can see how everything is doing and how everything is running. Let me see if I can turn this just slightly more centered. Yeah, if I had a taller tripod, that'd be great. Sometimes this monitor gives me some issues, so let's give it another second or two. Sometimes I have to unplug the monitor and plug it back in to actually get it to display stuff. I know. So we're gonna unplug it for a couple seconds. And I'll plug that back in. This isn't part of the overclocking guide. It's just something I have to deal with because this monitor isn't the greatest monitor. All right. Let me see here. That should be a bit more centered. I hope that looks okay. Wow, it even loaded up the page I had. Okay, let's go ahead. Windows support. Interesting. All right, so let's go ahead and let's start off by just looking at Task Manager. Go to Performance. It looks like we're running close to the speed that I said. Usually it does stuff like that, bounces around a little bit. All right, and we're gonna go ahead and let's open up CPU-Z. This is gonna allow us to actually see the speed and all that other good stuff that's going on with the CPU. So it says core speed 3990.48 megahertz. So that's basically how it works out to be 4 gigahertz. So it's not gonna be quite up to 4 gigahertz, but almost there. I believe you can also see your memory speed, and you want to double that because it's DDR4, so it's double, which is the speed that we have it set to. Okay, so you can see everything here. Everything looks good. So we're going to open up hardware monitor. It's going to allow us to take a look. No, we don't want to update. Keep an eye on everything. So we can actually close all the other stuff that we don't need open. Okay. Like this stuff here. Yeah, I can just close that whole thing. Alright, so we're going to have the RYZEN 7. We're going to see the max voltage was about where I set it. Temperatures seem to be fine. We're about 34, 35 degrees Celsius, 33. Okay. And then we can see the power, how much watts is pulling. I don't really care about power, so we can go ahead and do that. Amps, we're going to close that. All right, so here we can actually see the clock speed and the utilization. All right, so what we're going to do first, we're going to do our quick test, which is Cinebench. This will allow us to see exactly if the CPU is at least somewhat stable at this clock speed. All right, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to hit the run button. That's going to start it up, and we're going to have this off to the side. Oh, we already got a hitch. So it looks like we froze, guys. That means that this is probably not stable, at least not at this voltage. I might have to up the voltage, but personally I don't like running over 1.4 volts. So I'm probably gonna have to drop it down a little bit on the overclock. Again, I could probably get away with 1.42 volts, and maybe we'll try that and see if that's stable, but even then I'm not really that comfortable with that many volts. Yeah, it looks like we have a hard crash. Can we control delete? No, we cannot. Escape isn't doing anything. Yeah, this is a hard lock. We're just gonna reset the system. And so now we're going to go back into the BIOS just like we did at the start. Okay, so we should be okay back in the BIOS. All right, I'm going to assume that it just no, it didn't actually disregard my overclocking settings. Okay, so what we're gonna do is go down here, and instead of 1.4, we're gonna do 1.42. All right, so that's the new voltage that we're gonna be running. It's a little bit higher, should still be relatively safe. And I'm just doing this for testing purposes. I'm not gonna actually keep it at this high. Just want to see if that will be enough to actually keep the CPU cool. Another thing we could do is load line calibration. Where would that be? Because if you up your load line calibration, sometimes that can help. I know it's somewhere in here. I'm not sure where it is. But again, like I'm not that big into. I'm not gonna try to get like the most, top end overclock. It's probably in here. Nope. Oh well, not a big deal. So we're going to go ahead and save changes and reset. So it seems like we can load into Windows no problem at that voltage, but maybe we can get a better result at a slightly higher voltage. Alright, so let's go ahead and sign in again. Alright, so we have loaded into Windows. Just gonna wait for that little circle to finish up. And remember, this is not a fresh install of Windows. This is my computer I use every single day. I have tons of things installed. I have graphic drivers and all that other crap. So why does it keep doing Windows support? Try Microsoft Edge. No thanks. Alright, so let's go ahead to performance. And again, we're running at just about 3.9 to 4 gigahertz. Base speed is 4 gigahertz. So we're going to open up hardware monitor once again and kind of repeat this process. And this is what overclocking is, guys. If you haven't done it before, this is kind of what it entails. It's not a very quick procedure, but the results, if you take your time, can be very, very rewarding. You can get a lot more performance out of your hardware if you overclock, and you can do it safely. It doesn't have to be scary. So we have that up. Come on. And then we're going to open up Cinebench just like we did before, and see if we can actually get it to run this time. So we're going to move this off to the side so it doesn't interfere with it. And let's hit that run button. Let's see, does it starts. It starts. So far so good. I'm going to hit this. All right, and it locked up. So it seems like this CPU just can't really do 4 gigahertz. It seems stable, but once you hit all the cores, it really just locks up, just like it did before. Even on this amazing motherboard, a Crosshair 6 Hero, even with 1.42 volts. I guess I could try higher, but I'm not really going to mess with that. I don't want to go too high because then you can, then you can damage your CPU. And there's no point in overclocking if you don't have a CPU, So let's go ahead and reset the PC again. So now we're going to go down to 3.9 at 1.4 volts. And that should work. On my last motherboard, I did have it running at 3.9 gigahertz. So this CPU might be what's the limiting factor here. Now 3.9 and 4 gigahertz isn't going to be a big substantial change. Now to some people, they might want to have that 4 gigahertz magic number. Maybe for some workloads it might make a difference, but for most people 100 megahertz is not going to make a big difference. It's not going to be that huge of a deal. All right, so we're gonna pop this down to 3.9, and let's lower this back to 1.4. Now this should work. If this doesn't, then either my CPU has degraded over time, or there might be something going on with the DRAM. Because I know sometimes when I use DOCP, it just doesn't work properly, and when I just manually overclock it, it'll work much better. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and save changes and reset. Yeah, for overclocking, it's a lot of trial and error. You end up doing this over and over and over and over and over again. And when you do your stress test, it can take quite some time. It's not usually a quick process, especially if it's going to be a daily overclock, like your 24/7 overclock. You probably want to do a test for a long time, like at least a couple hours, if not a whole day. Because sometimes instability can find its way after a while. Like it might seem fine for an hour or two, and then you're rendering a long render, or you're doing some long-term gaming, and next thing you know, you run into instability. So that's loading up. I'm going to also load up Task Manager just so we can see the performance. All right, so now our base speed is 3.9 gigahertz. All right, so we have... Why does this keep loading up? Maybe because we keep crashing. I don't know. All right, so we have Cinebench here. Move that over to the side. We're going to open up CPU-Z, just like we did before. Oh, I don't think I need CPU-Z. I mean, we'll see if this is good enough. Yeah, it's not. It just tells us about it. Okay, so we know what we're running. And then we're going to open up Hardware Monitor. No, we don't want to update right now. And we'll just close everything, that we do not need. We don't need the power. I don't care about the amps right now. We're just looking at, like, everything else. Basically, yeah. So we'll keep that over here to the side so we can see the different numbers on that. I know it's hard to see. I'll try to get a better setup for the next time I stream this or even record it. But yeah, so we're getting about 1.4 volts was our max, and on the node. Yeah, and so right now we're running about 1.39 to 1.4 volts. Our core, where is that? Temperature on the node is currently at about 27 degrees Celsius. And our max was 36. So far, this is like without doing anything, and everything is basically running where it's supposed to be. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and hit run in just a second. I don't know what my computer is doing. You see that it's like a loading. Okay, run. So we're gonna go ahead and run it and see if it's stable, see if it works. So far, so good. We see all 16 cores are at 100%. We should see the voltage stay about where it's supposed to be. And we can see temperatures are rising. We see that that is at about 57 degrees Celsius right now. Interesting. All right, we got a score of 1680. Not a bad score. Usually around here, maybe around 1700 is a normal score for an overclock like this. And the score will bounce around depending on what's going on. If I close this, it might gain us a few more points. That's not really a big deal. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and run it a second time. Again, sometimes instability shows itself over time. All right, so I'm going to move the mouse. Mouse seems to move okay. Oh my gosh, Steam is open. I didn't realize that. About 57 degrees Celsius. Voltage on the node is about 1.33 and 1.33. Interesting. So I might be able to drop the voltage, and you can see how the temperature, the score actually went down a bit because I was moving the mouse around. I have a lot of things open in the background. Didn't even realize that. I don't know what that is, so we're gonna go ahead and exit that. With those things closed, we might actually see a bit of a higher run. We're gonna go ahead and run it again. All right, temperature again going back up just like it's supposed to, and it seems like our voltage is interesting because it seems like it's lower than what it is, but maybe I'm just reading it wrong. And again, all our cores are pinged at 100% and they are holding to their clock speed. And there you go, I closed some things in the background and our score actually went up to 1693, so potentially could get even over 1700. Alright, so what we're gonna do now is we're gonna go ahead and lower that voltage and see if we can pull back some things there. I don't think I can save it. I don't think I have an account, right? Yeah. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and shut down the computer, and then we'll go back to the BIOS, leave everything the same, and drop the voltage down. I'm gonna go pretty crazy with the voltage drop, maybe down to like 3.4, something like that. Because if you saw, it was running at about 1.33, so maybe 1.34 or 1.35 will be enough to run this overclock. Go ahead and get into the BIOS here. Let's make sure it focuses. Okay. So you can see our frequency up here is 3.9 gigahertz. Interesting. Okay, so we're gonna go over here, and now all we're gonna mess with is the voltage. 1.33. Let's try that. 1.33. Pretty extreme. I don't know if that's gonna work. But if it does, that'll drastically save us some temperature. So in case you guys don't know, the more voltage you put, the higher the temperatures are going to be. That's why you need a pretty legit cooler, whether it be air or liquid cooling, to be able to overclock. Stock AMD fans are good enough to do a little bit of an overclock, like maybe 200 megahertz, maybe 3 if you're lucky. But if you really want to get a significant overclock, you're going to want to push those voltage numbers, and that means you're going to want to have a good cooler to keep everything running smoothly. Also, good case fans help as well. So again, I'm going to make sure that I have all these things in the background closed, because I kind of forgot these things open up on their own sometimes. So we're going to go ahead and close that. That's like with my motherboard. Steam is probably going to open up. While that opens up, I'll get this other stuff prepped. Alright, so we have Cinebench. Yep, Steam is here. We're going to exit Steam. Everything else should be fine. Let's pull that down here. We're going to open up hardware monitor, just like before. No, do not update, please. And we're just going to go ahead and close, again, all the things that we don't care about, so that we can keep an eye on what we actually want to see. Close that, and close that. So now you can see. So our maximum voltage now is 1.337, and the current value is 1.337. So we're running at 1.337 volts. Everything else is the same, and we can move that over here so we can keep an eye on it. I just want to make sure everything else is closed. Good. Let's take a look at Task Manager real quick, just to make sure. So we have 3.9, 8 cores, 16 logical cores. I have virtualization disabled. I don't really do that anymore, but who knows, maybe I'll turn that back on. And you can see what we have over there. Okay, so moment of truth, we're gonna hit run, and we'll see if it actually is stable at this lower voltage. So we can see now our voltage is at 1.26 volts. That's crazy. I'd be shocked if this is stable at that. So in case you don't know, you add voltage to try to see if you can kind of keep the core stable. So as you remove voltage, you can also increase instabilization, or you can make it more unstable by lowering the voltage. Something else that can happen is if you're trying to undervolt something to reduce temperatures or to save power, you can also add in more instability, even if you're running at stock settings, just by lowering the voltage. So we're gonna see Right now, the current voltage that hardware monitor is detecting is about 1.269 volts, which is pretty low, to be honest, and especially for a 3.9 gigahertz overclock, that feels very little. And we're getting about the same scores as before, 1688, and our cores are basically maintaining everything that they're supposed to. So we're gonna run this. We're gonna keep running this to make sure that it is stable. And let's see, the voltage goes back to where it was. Processor is at 100%. All the cores are at where they're supposed to be in terms of 3.9 gigahertz. Again, it's always going to register as like 3.891 megahertz. That's how the math works out. But just round up. You're only a couple megahertz off of 3.9. And our scores seems to be very consistent. And so far, so good. We're going to hit that run button right now while it's still warm. Let's see our temperatures. So you can see already that by lowering the voltage, we aren't peaking quite as high as we used to. Before, we peaked at about, what was it, like 57 degrees Celsius. And now we're peaking at 54, which is, again, it might not sound like a lot, but it is. And look at that, we almost hit 1700 there. That's pretty cool. So let's go ahead and let's do this a couple more times. Because 3.9, like I said, is 100 megahertz off of 4. So you're not going to be missing that much. But look at the difference in voltage. We couldn't even do this test before without it locking up the system. And now we're running at a ton less voltage. A lot less voltage. And we're achieving pretty good results here. So this seems to be the sweet spot, 3.9 with a drastically reduced voltage. Because I'm sure if I pushed it to like 1.45 volts, maybe 1.47 volts, probably would have made 4 gigahertz stable, but the temperatures and just the damage that would be done, not worth it in my opinion. So I'd rather have it run slightly slower, but with much better temperatures and much less voltage. Ooh, look at that. Looks like we locked up. And our voltage spiked. We went up to basically, oh no, I think it's interesting because Cinebench crashed, but I still have control of my mouse and the other programs. So let's go into Task Manager and just force that to close End task. Alright, so it looks like we're not quite that stable. We're pretty stable, but not quite as stable as I would like to be. So we're going to go back into the BIOS and we're going to go ahead and hit it with maybe 1.34 volts. I think we're at 1.33, correct? So 1.34 volts might just be enough. Because again, this is what overclocking is all about, is just fine-tuning your overclock, making sure that you aren't using too many volts. You also don't want to be using too little or too few voltage, or so we're at 1.33. We're gonna drop up that to 1.34, because that was pretty good beforehand, and then it locked up after a bit. So we're gonna go ahead and put it a little bit higher voltage and see if that's stable. Again, the lower the volts, the better. You always want lower volts. Unless you're doing some sort of extreme overclocking, you're in a competition, you're doing LN2 overclocking, and then you don't really care. You just go as hard as you can, try to get the best that you can get. Alright, so we're back into Windows. We have a little bit higher voltage going on here. So we're going to open up Hardware Monitor. My computer wakes itself back up. And again, we're just going to go ahead and close all the things that we do not need to look at. Close that. We want to keep temperatures open. We can close those things. And now we're only looking at, again, the core clock speed, the load of the looking at the temperature in Celsius. It does give you the Fahrenheit, but the Celsius is what's going to be the most applicable. And then we can look at the voltage. So if we look here, our maximum voltage on the node was 1.34, and the max on the VID was 1.350 volts. So pretty close. And currently we're doing about 1.35 to 1.34, somewhere in between those two. And temperatures are at 27 degrees Celsius, so not too shabby at all. All right, so let's go ahead and close all those things that I have on to boot. All right, actually, let's go ahead and just turn those things off. Disabled, I'll enable that. Sonic Suite, we're going to disable that. And Steam, we're going to go ahead and disable you as well. Alright, so go ahead and close that. And let's go ahead and open Cinebench. Alrighty. Go ahead and hit run. Now, I'm pretty sure this should be fine because we're actually using more voltage than we were. So it should be fine, but we're going to see in the long term if it's going to be fine. So hardware monitor is reporting about 1.275 volts, which is, I don't know why it's reporting lower than what I'm putting it in for. We're hitting about 100%, and the clock speed is holding at 3.9 gigahertz. Okay, so we have 1690 as our score. Again, we're not really worried about score until we get something really crazy or wacky. Then we might worry about it. Just want to make sure everything that's off stays off. Okay, and let's run it again, just like before. And again, we're seeing about 1.275 volts, maybe a little bit, spikes a little higher, 1.28. 54 degrees Celsius, just like before, which is really good. That's good temperatures, very good temperatures actually, when you think about it. Typically, I like to be around in the 60s, so being below 60 degrees Celsius for me is really, really where I want to be. And it looks like our clock speeds are holding. It just seems so strange to me that once it goes under load, the volts drop versus going up. It's kind of funny. Interesting, to say the least. Alright, and let's go ahead and keep running it back to back. This way the system stays warm, and we can try to tease out any, instability that we can get to quickly. Prime 95 is a much longer term type of test. It puts a strain on your system to see if it can tease out any instability. And again, everything seems to be holding strong. Scores are roughly the same as before. Temperatures, okay, we hit a new high of 55 degrees Celsius. Again, we are running this back to back. But everything else seems to be just fine. And that was even a bit higher, 1694. Yeah, and so I'm doing this because I have the CPU. I don't want to leave any performance on the table that I can easily get to. And, CPU like this is going to be really good for live streaming and for, look at that, 1701. We broke that 1700 barrier. All that good stuff. RYZEN is great for multitasking, multi-threaded applications, so running games, streaming, recording, editing, all that type of stuff is going to be great for. And getting as much performance out of it as possible is just going to make it even better. So I guess that proves it. And then look at that, the next score is way lower at 1667, where the other one was at 1701. But I guess that proves that you don't need to have a 4 gigahertz overclock to hit over 1700 with a 1700. And of course, you can really go down the rabbit hole when it comes to overclocking. Excuse me, and get into a lot of different settings and load line calibrations and really pushing your system to its limits. But personally, that's above my head, and for most users who want to overclock, all that stuff isn't really necessary. That's for like extreme overclockers. But if you want to, you can go down that rabbit hole and learn about it and try it out for yourself. And we got that 1700 score again. Let's keep going. But again, I can't stress enough about how important it is to have a good CPU cooler, good case fans, good airflow in your case, and a good power supply. Also a good motherboard when it comes to overclocking. You really don't want to have any weak points except for the CPU itself when it comes to overclocking. Make sure your motherboard has a good VRM, power delivery. You want to make sure that your power supply can handle the overclock. You want to make sure that your temperatures won't go too crazy with a good CPU cooler and good airflow on your case. So having a case that has like a mesh front panel can definitely help. Like I have a 1700, and having that mesh front panel increases temperatures like crazy. Okay, look at the application error. More information can be found under blah blah blah. Okay, so basically after running that multiple times, you ran into an error there. So look at that. If I only ran it a couple times, I would have thought, hey, my overclock is quite stable, but look at that. We ran into an issue. Now that could be something as little as while I'm streaming, I run into OBS crashing, or it could be something more drastic depending on what you do on your computer. Could lead to OS corruptions, data corruption in general. It could happen in the middle of a big project that you need to finish that you're actually getting paid for. So you want to make sure that this is as stable as possible. And to be honest, if I was making serious money off of this machine, I probably would run it at stock settings or have purchased like the 1800X or 2700X that just out of the box run at much higher frequencies. But since this is more of a gaming computer and something that I do for fun, this is fine. And again, we test things. All right, so that was 1.34. So we're going to do 1.35 and see if that is any more stable than it was before. And again, we're going to leave everything else the same and get out of here. And as you can see in hardware monitor, my temperatures are totally safe and more than adequate. Being in the 50s is very, very good for a CPU, especially an overclock CPU with 8 cores and 16 threads. So we know it's not temperatures, we know it's not airflow, we know it's not the power supply because I have an 850 watt power supply, we know it's not the motherboard because I have a Crosshair 6 Hero, which is an amazing, probably the best motherboard you can get for X370. So it really is coming down to the CPU. And like I said earlier, I did lower the voltage quite a bit. So going from 1.4 or 1.42 down to 1.33 is pretty drastic change. So now we're back up to 1.35 volts, which again is totally safe. Not going to damage your CPU. You're going to have the full life and longevity of that CPU at this voltage. And that should be true all the way up till you hit 1.4 volts. I believe that's it, right? That's where we... Is there something else that I normally turn off? Oh yeah, here we go. Wattage. Alright, so this is where we want it to be. Let's go ahead. I don't think those things turn on because I believe I disabled them. Correct. Okay. And then we're going to open up Cinebench. Make that windowed. Alright, so let's go ahead and give it another shot. So we're going to hit run. And again, we know that's going to work for the most part. We're just trying to find the instabilities. Again, now we're up to 1.281 volts, which is higher than before, but still relatively low and safe. We're hitting the core clocks that we want to, and we're hitting 100%. And again, the scores are roughly the same because we're not changing the clock speed or the RAM speed. We're not changing anything other than how much voltage, and that's going to affect temperature. So we might see temperatures increase a little bit. As you can see, temperatures are already at 55 degrees Celsius, which again is not bad at all. But we're probably going to see temperatures come up a little bit higher because we are upping the voltage. All right, 1695, not a bad score. And just like, and again, everything I'm telling you is specific to the Ryzen CPUs. Don't listen to what I'm saying if you have an Intel CPU. Most of it's going to be the same, but when it comes to the voltage numbers, it's going to be different voltage numbers, all right? So Intel CPUs, you might want to stop at 1.35 volts. I don't know. That's something you can easily look up. But everything else that I've said about overclocking will hold true for those also. Yeah, so this is where it can get a little bit boring. You're just running it over and over and over again. I'd like to do this first just to see if we get any lockups, any failure, any crashes, and then move on to, once I do this for a while and I feel confident in this, to then Prime 95 and let Prime 95 run for a while and just see if it has any instability there. Again, we're getting close to that 1700 again, and we've already seen 1700 and above in this stream, so we know that 3.9 gigahertz can hit 1700, especially if I were to have a clean install of Windows and put the performance bias on Cinebench, it would definitely be hitting 1700. So you can see our temperatures are up to 56 degrees Celsius, which still is very, very safe and a very good temperature. Now for this CPU in particular, the 1700, overclocking is basically necessary if you really want to push it, because its base clock is 3 gigahertz, which is not bad, it's just not very fast. And compared to how much you can get out of it just by overclocking it a little bit, it really makes sense to overclock this one. The 1800X and 1700X, I think they go up to like 3.8, 3.9, or maybe even 4. I don't remember, but I know that their base clock is much higher and they can boost up pretty high. Where this one will only boost up to, I think, 3.7 on like one core. Look at that, 1703. So overclocking the whole thing to 3.9 on all cores will actually get you quite a bit more performance out of it. Now the story may change when we look at the second gen Ryzen, so the 2000 series chips. I think XFR for a lot of them is so good that for most people, leaving it at stock and just letting XFR take care of it, and that's their turbo boost technology, will be just fine. And only for certain workloads is manual overclocking actually better. And next year, when they release their 7nm stuff, we might even see higher clocks in general, which would also be really cool. But we'll have to wait and see for that. But yeah, so far this seems to be going pretty well. But the last time it seemed that way too, and then we got instability. But 1.35 volts is actually pretty good and pretty safe. So while this is running, I don't know why it does that. It drops down. It goes down to 1.281 volts, which is really weird because I have it set to 1.35, but I'm not complaining. And again, I'm clicking it so that it doesn't get a chance to cool down or really ramp down too much, that it's going to keep hitting that core pretty hard so that we can really see if there's any instability. That's another reason why you have to be careful with the different videos you see on YouTube about overclocking, because some of these YouTubers, whether it be for malicious reasons or just for being lazy, they don't do the proper stress test on their overclocks. They literally overclock, maybe run Cinebench 3 times and say, hey look, I got this amazing overclock, these chips are amazing, buy these chips because they overclock so well. And then you buy it, you take it home, you overclock it, you run Cinebench, you do a proper stress test for a couple hours or a day, and you find out it's not stable. And you think maybe it's your chip, maybe you bought a crappy chip by accident and you just lost the silicon lottery, as they say. But some of these YouTubers, they just don't do the proper testing. I understand it takes a lot of time, so that's why you got to take them with a grain of salt. Gamers Nexus really does do a great job of testing out their stuff, and their live streams are very, very long when they do overclocking. But like recently I saw Bitwit, Kyle, he overclocked. I forgot what it was, and he even admitted that he only did like 30 minutes of testing, and that was his quote unquote stable overclock. And even in this live stream, we saw that overclock can look pretty stable, and then out of nowhere, boom, just lock up your system. So doing proper stress testing is very important for those of you out there who might not be as familiar with overclocking. But so far, this is seeming pretty good. And this is not a proper stress test, in case any of you are wondering. Cinebench is a way to get a good feel, but after this, I'm going to be running Prime 95 for a long time to see if it's actually stable. Everything is looking good for now. Our scores are seeming fine, although the score isn't really what I'm going after. I just want to make sure it's stable. Temperatures are 56 degrees Celsius, 57 degrees Celsius seems to be where we're kind of plateauing. 1.281 volts is how much it's pulling, and we're getting 3.9 gigahertz. So yeah, this seems to be doing pretty good. So upping the voltage a little bit seems to be all that it needed, but this is still a lot less volts than we had when we were trying to run 4 gigahertz. So sometimes that top overclock just isn't really worth it, guys. We lost 100 megahertz, but we dropped like a whole millivolt, or whatever it's called. Alright, let's keep running it. We want to make sure that the CPU stays hot, that it stays under load as much as possible. That's how we're really going to pull out those instabilities. But to be honest, it is looking like this is the winner. 1.35 volts at 3.9 gigahertz. Seems about right. Also, sorry about the crappy quality. I have to do this from my phone because obviously I can't use OBS when I'm testing my CPU. Crashes occur and I can't use it in the BIOS either. So this is the only way I can really get to record everything until I get some sort of a capture card. And again, we're hitting about 56 to 57 degrees Celsius under load, which is very, very good temperatures. All 16 threads are under load, and all the cores are hitting 3.9 gigahertz. We've been streaming for about 50 minutes now. Yeah, I'm going to be streaming the PTS for Paladins later today, maybe in a couple hours. I just wanted to do this, and I figured why not stream it in case anybody wanted to see how to overclock or how to properly test the CPU. I understand not everybody in our audience is really interested in this sort of thing, and this isn't the most entertaining stream. But yes, we will be back later today with some Paladins. And I'm basically doing this because yesterday I had some instability while playing Paladins and streaming it at the same time. So yep, we'll be back later. Check the Discord. We'll have a more accurate time posted there of when we're going to start. Alright, so this seems to be doing pretty fine on Cinebench. No. So what we will do is we will open up Prime 95 and run a stress test. I'm going to do that one. And we can open up hardware monitor. And here we can see that everything's at 100%. We're hitting that 3.9 gigahertz overclock. Our temperatures on this test have actually gone up a bit. We're at 59 degrees Celsius. And remember, this is a stress test, so this is like worst case scenario. And looks like we're getting some instability at this already. So you can see how these two cores aren't running at 100%, and that's because we have some instability going on. I should say these two threads. So the one core unstable. So I might have to go in there and adjust the BIOS. But again, this is worst case scenario, so that's actually pretty good. So we're going to stop the test. And we're going to go ahead and restart the system and go into the BIOS. So again, as I said earlier, temperatures aren't the problem. The motherboard and power supply and the cooler aren't the problem. And it doesn't even seem like the clock is the problem. We probably just need a little bit more voltage. So 1.36 volts is what we're going to set it to. And we're going to save and exit. Alright, so those other applications, I think I disabled them, so they shouldn't open up. We're just going to have what we kind of need. And we're going to open up hardware monitor. I'm going to close that. And let's go ahead and just close everything that we don't need, just like before. We can get rid of that. We can get rid of that. And we can get rid of that. So now we will just have my processor information. Alright. I'm going to open up Prime 95. And do this one. Okay. And it's going to test everything. So as you can see, just like before, we're hitting temperature 58 degrees, 59 degrees Celsius. Everything's at 100% at 3.9 gigahertz, and we're hitting voltage of about 1.294 volts according to hardware monitor, although we know we did set it to 1.36 volts. And at least in the past couple seconds, we are still stable. We're hit 60 degrees Celsius. This is, again, a stress test. This is going to push our system to its limits. It's going to produce a lot of heat and really test its stability. So it's not going to just be something as easy as Cinebench, or even easier like gaming and that sort of thing. So if your overclock can withstand Prime 95, then it's pretty stable. And of course, you want to let this run for quite some time. Temperatures have gone up to 61 degrees Celsius, and our voltage is holding steady at about 1.294 volts. The CPU VDD in node 0 is at 1.281 volts. Which is kind of weird. I don't really know why that's happening, because I know in the BIOS you just saw me put it to 1.36 volts, and that is where its maximum is at, but it's right now not running quite that high. Temperatures continue to climb slowly. We're at 62 degrees Celsius right now. Voltage is holding pretty steady, not going any higher than what I said earlier, at 1.294 volts and 1.281 volts. However, we do seem to have lost... Okay, we are a little unstable. One of the CPU cores is not running. I don't believe that's part of the test. I think that means that that's unstable. Yeah, so that is a failure, so we're gonna stop the test. All workers. And you can see here that our percentages have gone back down. Alright, so we're gonna go back into the BIOS and just feed it a little bit more of that sweet, sweet voltage. Sorry about that. You don't have a PC, so this means nothing to you. Oh, oops, I wasn't paying attention. Alright, here we are. We're going to go back down, and we're going to hit that with 1.37 volts. So you can see we're slowly climbing our way back up to where we were. I mean, we're still significantly below what we had before, but we're climbing back up because we want to make sure it's completely stable. As you saw, it was somewhat stable, you know, at lower voltage when we were doing less demanding work, like Cinebench probably would have been fine gaming, maybe would have been fine while running OBS, but you might have, you know, I might have seen a random crash or lockup of my system because of it. So we're going to just want to make sure that we have it as stable as possible to not run into any of those problems. And I just moved the camera because this monitor kind of sucks. I wouldn't recommend this monitor. It is the Asus MG248Q gaming monitor. It's a 144 Hertz TN panel. It's not a bad screen per se, but it has little quirks with it. Now, if you get it cheap enough, I guess it's okay. I got this for about 140 bucks new, but there's little issues with it that really kind of annoy me. So we're gonna go ahead and open up hardware monitor as usual. The other good thing is we're not getting full system lockups or crashes. Again, when your whole system locks up or blue screens or crashes like that, that's when you really run the risk of data corruption, OS corruption, and things like that. It can still happen, don't get me wrong. It can still totally happen. It's a lot less likely when your whole computer doesn't lock up like that. Let's just make sure that's closed. All right, we're going to do small, maximum heat, FPU stress, data fits in L2 cache, RAM not tested much. So we're not testing our RAM here. We know our RAM can run at that speed. We're testing the CPU, so that's why we're picking small. And it's going to produce a lot of heat. That's why we see our temperatures actually getting into the 60s with Prime 95. So we're going to start that test. Let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so we can see all of our workers right here. When we pull up hardware monitor, we can see the temperatures are already almost to 60 degrees Celsius. Our voltage is at 1.306, 1.294. Temperatures are in 60 degrees Celsius, and everything is maxed out, 100% load at 3.9 gigahertz. Again, you want to leave this on. Once it's stable for a while, you want to leave this on for a long while. Overnight, during the day while you're at work or at school. You can. Some people do 24-hour tests and just leave it on, running this for a whole 24 hours. Make sure it's 100% stable. Just want to make sure that. Okay, so that's running. Okay. So far, so good. And if anyone's watching the re-upload and has made it this far along, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Come join us for our other live streams where we live stream video games and have a good time. Let me know if you want to see more PC-like videos. I can do more in-depth reviews and just discussion topics on different PC stuff. And as long as it's not overclocking, I can probably even show you like with better quality than this because I'm using my phone camera. Don't forget to hit the links in the description of this video. We're not selling anything, no affiliate links or anything like that. Just links to our social media and to our Discord channel. And this was more of an impromptu stream because I was gonna do this anyways. I was gonna overclock no matter what, and so I decided to just why not live stream it. And so far, so good. We're at 63 degrees Celsius, which again is totally within safe limits, well under the TJ max, or the maximum temperature of the CPU. So it's totally safe to run it at this temperature. And this is, again, a stress test. Is worst case scenario. Voltage is at a very safe voltage. No issue with running that voltage. And everything seems to be running just fine. So guys, I'm going to call the stream here. If you have any questions, leave them in the description, or better yet, at me in the Discord. I guess you could do at Grublord in the Discord to ask me any questions. And yeah, we'll catch you guys later tonight with another live stream, or any night, because we stream almost every day. Anyways, we'll catch you guys next time.